Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Things That Matter with Martie McNabb. So, as many of you by now know, I have a thing for the stories that get attached to things. So, I have probably at this point, 10 years in, have listened to thousands of stories. And I feel so honored and and um, and blessed to have this experience of being welcomed into these intricate stories, these stories that have feeling, that have touch, have a sense to them, that they hold on to the objects, or they're woven into the fabric, or they're you know carried on their backs or on their feet, or you name it. It's the all the things that we surround ourselves with, and we adorn ourselves with, the things that we keep, the things that matter, and the things we will leave behind. So in today's episode, I am thrilled to welcome a brand new friend who has the same name as me, the same first name, and spelled the same way. And it's so weird having this experience of writing back and saying, "Hi, Martie. Hi, Martie." I haven't ever had that before. I've had other Marties that had names spelled differently, but not the same way. So it's been a pleasure. But needless to say, I learned about Martie Mackay probably last fall, because we share a friend in common, Diana Place, and we were both lucky, Diana and Martie and I, to meet in Bristol, Rhode Island a couple of weeks ago for Quest 2024, and we got to meet in person. But before that, in the fall, I had been introduced to Martie and her work through our friend Diana Place, because we share a very similar connection to things and the stories. And Diana Place was an earlier guest on this podcast, and it was specifically aired during the month of March, which to me is basically the pandemic remembrance month. That's when it hit us here in the United States. And so Diana was like, "You need to meet Martie." And I'm like, "Who's Martie?" So Martie's also, I believe, a 333 collective member, and I joined that as well. I'm not as active as I'd like to be, but I am just fascinated with the thing that she brought today to share, her story, her pandemic story. And with that, I'm going to let her take it away. So welcome.
Thank you, Martie, my Martie twin. Diana Place years ago said, "You have to meet my new friend, Martie McNabb, because she will love your 9 things," which was my COVID sense of living. But before I talk about that, my photographs, I started out years ago using a little bit of my father's engineering background with his photography skills. I didn't pick those up. My mother's a painter. I didn't quite get her painting skills. So I've developed something that I call photo design. And basically it's using my photography, my computer, my iPhone to create images that speak for me, and hopefully delight people. And sometimes they're whimsical. But anyway, it's my Juniper studio. That's where I show all of my work. Juniper Studio, by the way, is named for my grandparents' farm in Virginia, where my father grew up. And I spent most of my summers there, sort of stuck up here in New England, which is great too. And also the juniper berry makes gin so tasty. So that's another little ode to the juniper. So let me begin and tell you how Juniper Studio and Martie Mackay dealt with the pandemic. It was a Sunday, let's call it March 23rd. Pretty nice day out. And I said to my husband, Doug, it's like, what is up with this? They had just shown a picture of the coronavirus little round spiky thing. I said, you know what? We have things that look just like that around the house. So my first foray into this was 9 things around my house that looked like the coronavirus. And it happened to be a little cactus, a dog toy, a drain in the back of my retaining wall, an orange golf ball. And I said, Doug, do you think if I put this on Instagram or Facebook, that people will be offended? And he said, well, do you care? You're not going to see anyone. So I put it on both and I said, 9 things around my house that look like the coronavirus. What's in your house? And then hashtag 9 things. Well, all my friends went, this is great. So the next day I thought, well, I'll do another one. I arranged all my pretty little spice boxes. What's around? What are 9 things in my house that are spicing up the pandemic? So on and on. Pretty soon I was doing it every day. Some days I would wake up and you're bored. You've no one to communicate with. My husband was still going to work, so I had an empty house. And each day I would wake up and think of, well, what do I have that people might get a kick out of? To remember how precious toilet paper was? Well, I took a tiara, because who doesn't have a toy tiara in their house? And I put it on all the things in my house that were tiara-worthy. My dog, a roll of toilet paper, the coffee maker, my binoculars. Oh, there's a bottle of vodka down there. So posted that. Everyone got a chuckle out of that one too. So mostly I aimed to make people laugh. But what I was really, if I'm going to be honest with you, I was getting my friends engaged with me and my life. I was getting a little love back. Oh my gosh, Martie, this is so funny. Thank you for putting this out there. Some friends would try their own little 9 things compilations. And I thought, well, I'm not really creating art necessarily here. I'm sending up smoke signals. I'm communicating. I am creating a community with these things and hopefully making people laugh. On April Fool's Day, I went upstairs and, we all have a closet full of costumes, don't we? And I brought down 9 of my wigs and did selfies. So, yep, that's me. On April Fool's Day, why not? That was fun. And then the next day, this is sort of a lot of what Martie McNabb talks about. This is a bunch of stuff that belonged to my grandparents and great-grandparents. And I captioned it 9 things in my house that predated the Spanish influenza of 1918. Just a little nod to history and a little, little nerdy way my brain thinks. I had a 9th grade English teacher named Mr. Stahl. I'm sure he had a first name, don't know what it was. He was the best English teacher I'd ever had. And he made us memorize lines from The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And I happen to have 4 plates that have sailing ships on them and some glue sticks. And there's a line in The Rime of the Ancient Mariner that says, day after day, we stuck, nor breath nor motion, as idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. I felt like that's what we were, stuck. So I did this compilation. Whoop, I'm so sorry, with the glue sticks and the sailing ships. So it was
Oh, I see. Stuck.
stuck,
It took
stuck.
me.
We were stuck. Um, I got my dog involved in all of this. I don't know why he allowed me to put sunglasses on him, but those are 9 different pairs of sunglasses. Um, Eventually, we started to be able to be let out. I was taking photos of things outside, but I kept this up. I did over 81 9 things, and eventually put them all in a big compilation and told the story of my pandemic era.
Yeah.
And that's what I did.
Wow.
Insane. It made me laugh. And there are some where I did a whole bunch of cocktail napkins that are, bitchy ladies saying mean things because they're mad. And there's some voodoo dolls in that 9 things too. So I wasn't always happy. I'll tell you that.
Uh-huh. Oh my God. I love that. Like this was, like you said, I like the idea of the smoke signals, that this was it, because everybody was, like everybody was struggling
Right.
around the world.
I had a community of people that would say, I'm looking forward to these every day. And then I did some homages to friends who live far away that I would never see. And pardon me a minute. I did one for Mother's Day with my mom and a Bible and a picture of her and my dad and a tube of lipstick. Things.
Yeah.
So it was communicating and community.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love it. I it would probably be racking my brain to think of 9 things like you, and do the like, and no, I don't have 9 wigs. Um and I don't have 9 pairs of different sunglasses. So but reading glasses, we just talked
Right,
about
there you
that.
can start with that. How I
Before we
see
started.
things.
how how we started to this conversation today. But yeah, and you allowed for some levity in a time that, like you said, your friends started looking for this, and it was just those moments where, yeah, there's a lot there that was dark and hard and everything, there's no question. But when you were offering these, it helped you, but it also helped your friends too.
Oh, and going to great lengths, like, the little cocktail mermaids that used to be in a cocktail
Mhm.
drink. Of course, we have them somewhere. And I thought of the beginning of Petticoat Junction. Okay, I'm dating myself. When the 3 sisters were sitting up in the water
Water
tower.
tower.
Yeah, so I took 9 antique teacups that were passed down from my mother and grandmothers and whatever,
Uh,
and I put those mermaids around the rims of 9 different teacups and reference Petticoat Junction. So it was a release for my, nostalgic, little nerdy thoughts. So some of it was like,
Nostalgic nerdy. I love that.
yes.
I don't think many people put those 2 words together.
But
But
Martie,
that's
I'm sure you, like all of your listeners and followers, you do have 9 things that obscurely relate. Um, Try it sometime. It's very cathartic, and then you have to pay attention and think, make a connection.
Right. Make it. I love that idea. Um, I'm working, I'm offering a series, a workshop series, and I it's what I'm finding is it's difficult to get people to actually bring, this is online, of course,
Mhm.
to bring, um, you know, 3 to 5 objects each time, to actually bring them. So I'm like thinking, huh, that would be to get people to think about 9 things, like, and bring not, you know, because it's not only the thinking of it, it's also the creating, like this, like you've done, the creating the images so carefully. Like that's, you know, the combination of both, but getting people to do that is, you know, yeah, and it gets them really considering and making like those connections. And I think that that's probably, I'm sure your friends, you said some friends started doing some of it themselves. They did.
Yeah, some of them had great results. But it's interesting because if you say, find 3 things you wanna show, it's a panic, like, "Oh, they must be significant."
I know.
Don't have to be significant. I mean,
That's
open your
that's
junk drawer, find 3 interesting things in the junk drawer. Everything in there has a story, or it would be in the garbage can. Like, start
well, that's the
small.
other thing.
Yeah. That's true.
And that's part of what the work that I do too is sort of like, you know, is does it have a purpose? Like in my life, as you know, Martie, live part-time in Vermont with my mom, part-time in Albuquerque with my wife and mother-in-law, and part-time in a 21-foot Winnebago Travato that you saw.
Uh-huh.
And so my things that I keep have to have a purpose or a story, and of course ideally both. But
Right.
this is the same conversation I have over and over again, the, you know, the last 10 years, with people saying no, no, it doesn't have to be, you know, like right now your work does look like a work of art. Like right now with that behind you and your little things, it is a work of art. um but
Thank
but with my other guests, I'm like, no, it can be. And I'm so grateful to my first guest, who I didn't have to explain it to him. He brought a $2 air freshener fan, a $2 air freshener fan that you put into the, you know, like the
Oh, yeah,
vent
yeah, yeah, yeah,
thing, you know,
yeah.
so that
Mhm.
it you know, blows in and through and gets an air freshener. And he brought that and talked about his daughter who had passed away, and that she had insisted that they go and buy that because his car stunk. And she's like, I'm not going to drive with you in this car with
Uh,
it smelling like this. So, anyway, the whole
wow.
thing was about that $2. And then when we were finished with that, he pulls down a little empty tube, like lip gloss tube from Mary Kay. And he
Yeah.
keeps that because his mother ended up selling Mary Kay, and, and, you know, changing her life because of that experience. And so I always say, like you were saying, in your drawer, like I'm like anywhere, people are like, oh, you know, but they, what I realize is it's so easy for, I was a high school biology teacher for 8.5 years in New York City
Wow.
public schools. And it's one of those things that where people have an automatic reaction to assume that the assignment is much more challenging than it is.
Mhm.
Like, you know, my students, I'm like, so what's the chance that if you have not heard it in class and we've reviewed it many times, what's the chance that it's going to be on the test?
Uh-huh.
And they'd all panic, you know, and I'm like, there's zero. There is absolutely no chance that happens.
Easy.
But
Just
we have
listen.
that immediate, like, and I started my events called show and tell. Show
Mhm.
and tell. In the United States, I learned, because I started this in New York City, so it's not a universal experience, but in the United States it is. So show and tell. Well, what happens there? I'm like, you bring an object or a photo and you tell a story. Like that's what happened. But like you said, that automatic thing. So I think I probably would overthink your assignment too, Martie,
Right,
in
maybe
terms of
so.
finding 9 things. So, but that's why in essence we need teachers and in people to inspire us and ask us those questions and lighten it up and just say it, just pick any 9 things and see what connection they have or what
Oh yeah, to
connection you
sort
could
of
have.
like grab things and then make a story, then
Right.
invent some narrative that connects them all.
Yeah. And the reality is that this is a story that you started during the pandemic that stitched together your life with other people's lives. And I didn't realize your husband was, left where in other people, their kids came home like Diana. Their partners came home. They were both trying to work at home, so you were like,
Well, I wasn't alone
oh, you
because
had
my
kids.
son and his fiance were out here from New York. I'm an hour from New York City. So they
Okay.
were around, but they were working and very self-sufficient. Uh, when my husband's around, he's a big personality. He's awesome, but he'd be like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "I don't know." It was nice to just have the me
Yeah.
time, and then, around dinner time, we'd sit and talk about the 9 things that I had done that day. So,
Oh,
it was
that's cool.
everything was an interesting balance for us, like a little oasis, and, um, we just were scared. We were scared, and, Doug would go down half an hour down the Merritt Parkway, and there would be nobody on the highways. And the police weren't on the highways. Of course, they weren't, because nobody was anywhere. And then there'd be drag racers. So it was just,
Oh,
it
wow.
seemed perilous.
Yeah.
But then we had wildlife all around us. It was
Yeah.
just, I mean, everybody has their unique um mix of terror and wonder and isolation and reconnection with family. If that was a universal, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it certainly was for me, as I had mentioned earlier. Like I lost um probably 18 people in the first year of the pandemic, year and a half, I guess, 18 months.
Were you in
Um
New York City then?
so I wasn't, but these were friends because I lived in New York City originally, and so these were friends of mine. Um Quite a few of them. But and they didn't pass away from COVID, but I'm pretty sure 2 of them didn't seek medical attention that they would normally have, not because they thought they were going to get COVID, but because they didn't want to burden the medical system. So
Mhm.
they probably chose not to get some things looked at or checked because of it. So it's really hard to know, but yeah, it was a interesting times of like deep loss and then also reconnecting with the love of my life, who's now
Right.
my wife. So yeah, we've all, and I remember somebody came to one of these. I have an event ongoing, and they came and they were like, well, my experience of the pandemic was good in a way. Like I didn't lose anybody. I got to stay home and work. Therefore, I was able to be with my son, who was young, who was like four or 5 years old. And I'm like, that's Sam. I'm like, that's fine. We're not looking for just sad. Like we're
Right.
the reality is that we have all of those stories within us. They don't, it's not one or the other. It's all, like you said, there was a deep undercurrent of fear and anxiety about life and what's going to happen next. And is everybody going to be okay? There was that deep thing current through everything. But the moments with your 9 things and the joy and the thought that went into it and the caring and the art of it all, I'm sure it helps lots of people. And I look forward to, I didn't look at all of them, but I'm looking forward to seeing more of those. And I think it's a fabulous idea. I love the concept. I think that it's so helpful. And I love one of the things, I had a friend who was like, you need to start doing your show and tells online with the pandemic. I had tried a little bit, but I had loved doing them in person. But she's like, and her big thing was she's like, you have to do one about kitchens, like what stuff did people have in their kitchen or find in their kitchen, because everybody was spending so much more time there. And so I was just,
I
it's,
think that's great. And
yeah,
and if I could just the Diana's 333 event,
yeah,
you had the group of us in your little section talk about that. And one of the women has her grandmother or great grandmother's measuring cups
yeah,
in her kitchen that were metal and still have the imprint of her grandmother's fingers. So I still think about that. And,
right,
those stories that you get people to share are just beautiful.
yeah, yeah. And for me, it also makes me realize, like, it makes me understand them better.
Hmm.
And it's like, oh, that's like just even finding out about you and your father, who was, an engineer, but who loved photography equipment, not necessarily the taking the photographs, but he was just fascinated with the equipment and the texture and the feel of it and all of that kind of stuff. And then your mother, who is the painter, and but it's finding our way to what our art is, or what we love to do.
Exactly. And you can't say, oh, poor me, I can't paint, or like, I'm dumb, I'm not great technical photographer.
Right.
You do what, you find out what you can do and love it. Uh,
Yeah. Well, I love it. And I love that you came up with a new term. Like, that's what they say in life is, coming up with a new term, like photo design or photo designer,
Yeah.
is the best thing. I end up talking about my events being story sharing events and not storytelling events,
Yes.
because I love my friends who are storytellers, but it's very performative. And I'm glad you got to experience my event at Quest 2024, because what I'm trying to create in these is connective, not performative experiences, but connective. That ability to walk up and say, oh, you've got your grandmother's, oh, well, I have my grandmother's wooden spoon. I have like this or that, or, my aunts or whatever. It's something that you can relate and connect with one another on.
That is really brilliant. Just the way you state your purpose with this, because everybody loves a good performance, but then you're like, I watched this woman or this man, and this is kind of what they said. And then you go, oh, that was great. But that it sort of ends there. If
Yeah.
you and I are talking about shared objects and what the story was, there's always a more personal connection. So that's
Yeah.
great.
I have a friend. The fascinating thing is, I have one friend who's in Italy. She invited another friend to one of the kitchen editions, the My Favorite Thing kitchen edition. I had my friend who's in Baltimore now join. This was all virtually. And the next thing I know, two people on totally opposite, areas of the world, they ended up discovering that both their grandfathers were very involved in all the different varieties of apples. And so they started having like this side, I'm like, you need to talk, you need to get together. And, and one was in the agriculture, like worked in a school, a university about agriculture and, all of this stuff. And I was just like, wow, to have two people in the same call, know this massive amount of information about apples because of their grandfathers. I was just like, this is
That's
fascinating.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's great. That's what life is all about, I
That
think.
is
Really, it's really
building
wonderful. Thank
connections.
you.
And that's what Diana is all about. And the 333 collective, I can't speak more highly, connected me with, I think I knew of Sky, but I really connected with her after, she got involved in the 333 with the storytelling event. And then I've seen her out in California, then now here on this coast, and met her mom. And so this is all about building deeper connections. So,
Yeah,
and
it was an amazing event. I can't wait till next year's.
me too. So one last thing then
Okay.
before we wrap up. So, because my work is all about legacy. So
Mm-hmm.
it's connection, community, and legacy. So one thing, I'm just curious if you've considered what you would like to have happen with this piece of art that you created when you're dead and gone.
Um, I will tell you that I made a little cheat sheet that explains what these are about.
Yeah.
Um, I would like my kids to say to their children, okay, Birdie did this during the pandemic, and let's just walk through some of them.
Mhm.
And then just tell a story about me that is funny and might make them just think that there's something maybe special about me that's different from other people.
You and those 9 wigs and your dog in the, yes, I think anybody could know that there's something unique about you. So that's that's wonderful. And I think the real thing is, Martie, is that you have this is a piece of art, but it's also a piece of history.
I think you're
and
right.
and this isn't, and your children passing this on to their children, this is pandemic history, right? And so, but it's a different way as opposed to reading it, and like you were saying, the Spanish flu, right? So instead of reading the description of it, they tangibly and visually can experience sort of the feeling and the isolation and all of that. They get a different view into this period of time. So the museums and historical societies knew that the stuff that you are creating, and speaking of which, it may be something that you would consider doing, is libraries and museums, especially historical societies, were looking for these kinds of objects, these kinds of things that were created during, because they knew that history, they knew this was fascinating, this was history that was firsthand accounts of the experience. So if it's just something to consider, because they were looking for this kind of stuff to hold on to, because it's such a unique way to express yourself during that time, and it gives the feel of it, of the experience.
That would be something really interesting to explore because, as you can tell, I'm pretty passionate about
Yes,
this. It was
I
also
can see why.
I haven't been able to replicate this, and
Yeah.
I hope that we don't need another pandemic to get me back on another one.
Right? Yeah,
So, but
I
I
hope
would
not
love.
either, but I definitely, it's one of those things. I think that it would be, I think it would be worth, like, obviously have something for your kids and your grandkids, but I do really think that you should consider reaching out to somebody for it, because it's
do that.
such a beautiful way to understand the pandemic, that brings in so much feeling, you know.
Great.
Yeah,
Thank you for that's a really good suggestion.
yeah.
Do that.
Yeah,
We could
good.
look
So
for
that's
ideas another
part of
time.
your, oh, you're welcome. And that's part of a legacy, which is obviously what you create all the time. We always are living history. We're always creating this, our legacies, but this is a standout piece of pandemic legacy work. So thank
Mm.
you.
Thank you. Thank you for, and also thank you, Martie, so much for making me think about this and and really reflect, 4.5 years later, what was this all about?
Yeah,
I was daily thinking of something clever and then, the technicalities of putting it together
right.
and then going on with my life. But it was a nice exercise for me to really think about what it was all about. So thank you.
Yeah. And I think it's great for other people to slow down and think and make connections and all that. So you're a connection builder as well, obviously. So thank you. Thank you
That's
so
a great.
much.
Thank you. Thank you,
Yeah.
Martie.
Yeah. So, and everyone for listening, thank you for listening to this episode of Things That Matter with Martie McNabb. And please check out my other episodes and like and share and all that good stuff. And if you would like to be a guest on Things That Matter, please reach out to me at info@showandtales.com and just put podcast guest in the subject line, because like everyone, we're all getting overwhelmed with those emails. But if I see that and I can search it easily, I might find it in my overwhelming inbox. But I appreciate your time today, and thank you so much, Martie. The other Martie. I can't believe that I had a Martie on on Things That Matter with Martie McNabb. I had another Martie.
Awesome.
So
I'm so blessed.
me too, me too. And I look forward to staying in touch and following you and seeing you next year, wherever that ends up being, and maybe seeing you in the 333 collective.
I will be there. All
Yes.
right. Thank you, Martie. I
All
so
right.
appreciate it. Right.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.